Everyone, please give a warm Yellow Jacket welcome to our guest, George Israel.
I want to thank you all for that warm welcome, and thank you, Salvador, for that introduction. I thought he did an excellent job of keeping it short and sweet, so I do appreciate him doing that. I'm going to be talking to you today about some of the secrets of success in building strong organizations, and this is true if it's not for profit, it's true in the profit arena as well. In fact, my business experience, some of it includes doing 3 turnarounds and 1 startup. So this will apply whether it's a new company or applies whether it's a failing company. But first, they promised me I could do a little commercial for the Ferst Foundation. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what we do at Ferst. This is some Georgia literacy facts that I think you'll find very interesting. 61% of all low-income families do not have a single piece of reading material that is suitable for a child. And we wonder why we have illiteracy in our communities. A third of our children come to school unprepared to learn. 71% of Georgia's 4th graders read below grade level. Georgia consistently scores low on the SAT scoring. 1 out of 4 adults in Georgia operates at a low literacy level, and high school non-completion in Georgia costs the state $18 billion per year in lost or foregone income. I think I went fast. This will also give you a little bit about the word disparities in early vocabulary growth. And it gives you a real illustration of why children get to the 1st grade and they're not able to read and they're not ready to learn. The important thing is for kids to be ready to learn when they hit kindergarten. If they're ready to learn, and I'm going to show you some scores in a moment that is going to blow you away. That's the results from what the Ferst Foundation did in Morgan County and several of the surrounding counties. It's about 14 where we've got a penetration rate of 40% or better. In Morgan County, it's between 70 and 80%. They've maintained that consistently, and they're scoring very, very high. A lot of folks don't know this, but 7 out of 10 prisoners operate at low literacy levels. 85% of all juvenile offenders have reading problems, and Georgia spends over $52 a day to house a prisoner. We can provide a book for free, 1 a month, for $3 a book. And I'd rather buy books than have to build prisons. Economic development is another place where it really, really costs us. What people are interested in when they bring or looking at a state to locate their company, they want people that are ready to be trained. They don't expect them to know the job, but they got to be ready to be trained. So if they come out illiterate, they cannot be trained. I got interested in literacy actually back in the 1980s because we were doing great economic development in Macon. We brought in companies like Boeing, Northrop, a lot of others, the companies, and those employers were coming back to me saying, you didn't tell me your illiteracy rate was like 30% in Macon. So we got a group together. We raised about $500,000 with grants from the Knight Foundation, grants from IBM. We then put a program together called Learning to Read or Reading to Write, Writing to Read. I can't remember the name of the program, but a great program, and it worked. In fact, there are 2 folks, I wish that you could meet them. One was a very successful insurance agent. He was in the casualty insurance business, had a very large office, very large organization. And then when he talked about how he would go around with a paper under his arm to fool everybody to think he could read. He'd take his mail and tell his secretary, my eyes or my glasses, read this to me. So he was one that actually came out of the closet and said, I can't read. And he began to go through the training program and then could read. But it's the greatest barrier for economic development in any community. The absence of a literate workforce. I want now Robin first. Robin, would you please stand? Robin is our founder and was our president until they hired me. And I'd like also to ask the rest of the board of the Ferst Foundation to stand with Robin. But this is who we are at the Ferst Foundation. We're a 501c3 organization supporting childhood literacy efforts. We mail books in 2000, started, and we mail over 2.9 million books to over 159,000 children. And those numbers are old. They're actually larger than that today. The goal is to go statewide. We currently operate in 80 of Georgia's 159 counties, and our purpose is to go statewide. We hope in 2012 to really get a program started here in the Atlanta area so we can really begin to penetrate some of those inner city schools and parents that feed into those schools so we can make some difference up here. And I think you saw from the test scores and what Errol Davis is trying to clean up down at the Atlanta Public Schools, it's something that's badly, badly needed. This is what we do. There are actually two programs that are put together. Dolly Parton's Library is our partner in Tennessee. That's where we get the books and leap into books, reading every day, and that equals the Ferst Foundation. What we do that's a little bit different in other states is we do a newsletter which is targeted to make sure we get the message out to parents about how they need to read, when they need to read, what kind of questions do you ask a child to make sure the child is grasping the story. Dolly Parton Library does the book selection. We do the communication piece, which, as I said, had that parent's guide information. This is where we are today, what counties we're in. We do have some, if you notice, in Fulton County. We're just not getting the penetration in Fulton County that we need to get. In the Atlanta metro area, there are over 350,000 children under the age of 5. And our purpose in the state of Georgia, there are over 750,000 children under the age of 5. And that's why we use that. Imagine the possibilities. Imagine if every child was being read to in this state once a day. Imagine the difference we could make in economic development. Imagine the difference we could make in reducing crime rates. I mean, it absolutely will work, and we've got the numbers to know it does. Why are so many Georgia communities eager to partner with us in childhood literacy? Because it works. And look at these numbers. 85% of the total sample of families receiving the book from the library report reading to their child almost every day or more. You put that book in the hands of a child, and the child's going to be at that parent's knee saying, "Read to me, Mama. Read to me, Daddy," and they'll do it. It also concluded that parents overwhelmingly report that the program is effective, increases the time they spend with the child, the bonding between the child and the parent. It increases the parents' awareness of their children's reading levels and their deficiencies. Here are the results. This is in Morgan County, and these are all the grades. This is our first class, 8th graders. They just took the CRCT test last spring, and look at these numbers. 99.6% in reading. They tied for 3rd. And Morgan County is not a rich community, folks. It's a cross-section, a cosmos of all of Georgia. But look at these numbers across the board. The state had only 96. The difference, 3.6%. Morgan County in English language arts, 96.7. The state of Georgia averaged only 92.8. Morgan County, 81%. The state only 77% in math. 3.9% difference. Science, Morgan County had 78.6. The state average is almost 11.6% difference. Now these are very dramatic numbers, but we also can show you, we've looked in other counties. These are the counties we've been in before 2004. We know there are a couple we put in here because they've gotten the penetration. But what we've looked at is those counties that have gotten a penetration of 40% or greater and are tracking them to see what difference is made on the CRCT scores. And down here, you can see the state averages and how much improvement is occurring. Well, that's it on the Ferst Foundation, and I thank you for your indulgence because we believe in what we do at Ferst. Now I want to talk about what makes an organization successful. And really it's a combination of things. I call it the 3 Ps: people, production, and profits. The people side is the most important. The reason for that is because people are what make a business successful. It is not the plant, it's not the equipment, it's not the materials, it's not the raw resources that go into processes, it's people. It's the people that supply the ingenuity, the creativity, their education, their experience that can be born and brought to bear on the processes. As I mentioned, in my experience, I've done a number of turnarounds and startups on companies. And the most important thing is the job description. And I hate to see job descriptions that are 7 or 8 pages long. It needs to be 1 page, just one. And you need to ask basically several questions. The first one is, and I don't care what position it is, what is the major outcome or objectives, supposed to be objectives to be accomplished by the person in this particular role? Number 2, what are the most frequent and essential work activities? What's essential? What are the most essential work activities? The reason we're asking these questions, you'll see in a moment, is because we're going to take a behavioral instrument and apply so that we understand that the person has the behavioral vectors to actually do the job. What people and how many are managed and how many are direct reports? What are the primary people contacts, with whom, for what purpose, and how often? What behavioral traits, attitudes, skills are required to perform this task? I've been using behavioral instruments really going back to when I was mayor, and that was 1980. And the reason I did it was one of the hires I made, who had a double master's from Cornell University, did not have the behavior to do the job, and it was an absolute disaster. After hiring him and bringing him to Macon, I then had to bring him into the office to say, Ron, you're not making it here, and you're going to need to go back home. I'm sorry. A horrible thing. A mishire is a horrible thing. The first mishire I had was actually back when I was in my 20s, when I hired a secretary. She was awful cute. I was single. I felt sorry for her. And boy, did I pay the price, because at the end of that week, I realized she could not spell C-A-T. I got all ready to do it. I went to my manager, Tom James, and I said, Tom, Peggy's not working. And he said, I knew it. He said, you hired her. You're going to have to let her go. So I got up my courage that Friday, went into my office. I told her, I said, I need to see you for a moment before you leave today. She said, I need to talk to you too. And she came in, sat down, and she said, I was ready to go. She said, I found a new job, and I hate to do this to you, but it just pays so much more. I said, really? Really? I hate to hear that. But behavioral traits and attitudes, skills to perform the work are really important. What are the toughest parts of this job day to day? There are things in every job that are just absolutely tough. And you got to have the behavior to do it day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, year in, year out. Let's take a salesman, because I'm going to show you a behavioral profile on a salesman in just a moment. The toughest thing for a salesman is prospecting. That's hard work. You may not think it is, but it's hard work. And the second thing is making the calls. And I don't care if they're on the phone calling or they go call in person. If they have a little bit of call reluctance, if they're a little bit fearful, it's going to take and run their batteries down to get the courage up to go in there and ask for the sale. So you got to have strong batteries if you're a salesperson. The prerequisite for employment: education, training, and experience. All of that comes into bear along with the behavior as to whether or not they can get the job done. And then the compensation package. But folks, you can get this done on one sheet of paper. It doesn't have to where you lift all the responsibilities as if you're trying to make sure if I fire you, I know you've violated one of these job descriptions. Keep it simple. It needs to be simple because they also need to understand what they're facing in that job. The other thing is the strict adherence to a minimum 3 interview system. Now, recruit and select, we haven't talked about how do you get out there and actually find them. The best way to find it is to recruit somebody. It's not to put an ad in the paper. You put an ad in the paper, who's searching the want ads? People that are unemployed. I can tell you that the big chance is that whoever answers that ad is out of work for a reason. And they're going to come and try to sell you on hiring them. Does that make sense? So the best way is to have a network of people, bankers, a lot of others. Who do you know that fits this particular profile? Who do you know that might make a success in this work? Who do you know that could really sell? Who do you know that probably should have be in another position because they're smart, they're capable, they're aggressive, they're sociable, they always, if you start asking it that way, they'll give you names. Interview number 1, the purpose. Has one purpose. Get to know them. You're going to do a 3-interview system. You explain to them this is a 3-interview system. Don't expect to come on the first interview and to get the job because we're going to go through a process here. The other thing is to get them to agree to take the behavioral assessment. This is the result of the behavioral assessment. And I know that's hard to read, and I figured it would be when we got it up on the screen. But this one right here is sales manager. This one here is a salesperson. You don't want this person as a salesperson. Why? Does this work? Look. Yeah. Look at the fearless factor. I told you about that. They are very, very cautious. They're not going to make a good salesperson. This actually is done by Dr. Frank Merritt, and I think he went to Tech, if I'm not mistaken. But Dr. Merritt developed this called Talent Quest. They do it for almost all of the banking industry, almost all of them. I know all in Georgia, they do them. What they've done is they've gone in and taken every position that you usually have in a bank, and they have tested those that were successful. They've tested those that did not really perform that well but were average, and they've tested those that did not make it. So when they put this profile together, the green range right here, the green range, which is right here, is the peak performance range. And if you notice on this one for the sales manager, they only meet it in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 areas out of 32 behavioral vectors. And we're all different. I'll explain how this works. This works on a bell curve. This portion right here is where 80% of the people will fall. 80%. Another reason the sales manager is not going to work, look at this. Solitary, not people-oriented. And how is he going to be able to manage people if he's not oriented towards people? He's going to be one that goes in his office and closes the door, and you're not going to see him till 6 o'clock when he gets ready to go home. The other thing, look at this right here, has a negative view of others. Now, this is an extreme, but you get some back like this, and this is why it's always important to do that interview and keep it on a 3-interview system. But it works, and it's very successful. Interview number 2. You got one purpose. Take that assessment, study it, and validate it. You want to validate it. You want to zero in on the weaknesses and ask probing questions, open-ended, that encourages them to talk. And you got to have done your homework. You got to know the position to know how to do that. and every position is going to be a little bit different. At the end of the assessment, you know whether you're going to proceed or it's going to end. If it had been this man right here, I would have simply just said, well, I want to thank you for the opportunity to meet you, to have you in, but I'm going to say we stop. I'm going to keep you about your behavioral assessment. If I find something that I think you're going to be equipped and behaviorally to do you mind if I share that with someone else that I know? And they always say, yeah. In fact, they'll call back and say, have you given it to somebody yet? Can I follow up? Interview number 3. If someone comes back for that third interview, the purpose you got is, do we have a deal? You will have zeroed in on what their behaviors were, whether they were good or bad. You would have asked them questions. You now have gotten a satisfactory answer. This is a person. Do they fit into our culture here? Do they fit into the company? Is it somebody we want representing the company, the organization? And if it is, in the third interview, your purpose is one thing. Do we have a deal? Welcome to the company. Now, after someone's hired, a lot of companies do not really get into the training like I like to see done. I'm one who is a training freak. I love to have people properly trained. It makes all the difference in the world. You want to train them on the organization. And training them on the organization, what's the vision? What's the mission? What's the tactical, strategic plan, the tactical plans? What are we doing? This helps an employee. Every employee in an organization ought to be able to answer that. If they get on an elevator with a guest or somebody coming in, if the guest asks them, what's the vision of your company? I want every employee to be able to answer it. I think that is very important. It's also important for them to understand that, because the other thing you're going to want to do as the leader, and we're going to talk about leadership, is you've got to let employees know where the company is relative to the vision, relative to the strategy, relative to the goals for that year. Job-specific training is important. Everybody needs to understand their job. In fact, everywhere I have ever been as the president, we have a job description manual that shows every day what a person should do. Every single solitary day. Now, I'll tell you what that does. If you got that job description manual that really goes through it, everything, how to do it, by the numbers, I don't care if it's a CPA or a CFO or whoever, you know what they're going to be doing and what they got to do, and it's much easier to know what their activities are and where their frustrations are. But it also means if they ever leave, you've got the manual, you got the blueprint, you can replace that person. The other is training as a leader in managing themselves. It's important within an organization, everybody that is in a position of responsibility and supervision, to be a leader. And we're going to talk a minute about how leaders, are they born or are they made? I can tell you, they're made. Decision making and problem solving. Everywhere I go, I teach every person in the organization on how to make decisions and how to solve problems. And we use classic methods, Harvard matrix and other things, but we go all the way through it, using actual examples so they understand how to make decisions. I learned that when I was mayor. I had a guy who was probably 50 years old. I was only 31, came to my office, and he had a problem out at the airport, and he left that monkey right on my desk. And I said, wait a minute, he's been running airports for 25 years. He needs to be doing this. But the thing I learned is he did not know how to go through a formal process. So the first time we went through it was I brought some folks in from Harvard, and we trained our managers on how to make decisions and how to solve problems. Everybody in the organization. If you do that, you have less problems coming up to the top. People will then also, you empower them, and they can make those decisions and problem solve, and it builds their confidence. Manage and motivate. First thing is highest defined criteria. What's important to you about your business career? What do you want your epitaph to read about your career at the end of your life? What do you want people who have worked with you to think about you when you get to the end of your career or your business life? If you do this and do it in their personal life, their family life, and in their business life, and you'll see why in a moment, why it is so important to have that understanding. So many bosses in this world do not get the highest defined criteria. They do not know what their people do even off time. They don't show that personal interest in them as people. And if you don't show the interest as people, what people are going to see a person who doesn't show that interest is a person who is self-centered and only interested in me. And as a leader, if they see that's what's coming out of you, you're not going to get them motivated and very excited about getting your goals accomplished. Goal setting. This needs to happen every year. Goal setting in the area of what are your business goals? What are your personal goals? It may be somebody who did not go back to school and you realize how smart they are. Why don't you set a goal of going back to school? Why don't you go ahead and get your baccalaureate? Go back to college. They're continuing education available everywhere in this state. Use it. But goal setting, what do they want? Here in this, it also is what do they need at home. You need to have an idea. What are their goals? I had one lady that was, when I was at Ficklin Walker, that in going through the goal setting, she told me that she and her husband, Chris, had already picked out a boat they wanted to buy. And I'm going to tell you something. Every one-on-one that I had with her, I would ask that, start the question, how close are we to getting the boat? And it's a big boat. It's like a $110,000 boat. But that's what they wanted. They wanted a boat. They had a place at the Gulf, but they wanted that boat. And you use that in the one-on-one. But you're also helping them to keep their goals in front of them and using that to help them stay motivated. And we figured it out. I said, all right, if you do this and we can grow the property management division to this point, I can pay you X, whereas right now I'm limited. Get out there and get us. And she went. She started acquiring property management companies around the state of Georgia, and we grew it from 4,000 units we managed to over 9,000 units that we managed. Okay, let's talk about leadership. Because if you have the people, you've trained them, you've managed and motivated them, things are going, you hope, good, you now need to really apply some leadership skills. Leadership is a process by which a person influences others to accomplish an objective. Good leaders are made. They are not born. And how many of you have picked up books and read history books about George Washington, about how he stood so tall, he was so handsome and debonair, he was just a natural president? No. George Washington worked at it. Why do you think he wore a general's uniform to the Continental Congress? He was way ahead of everybody else. He wanted to be the general, and he was the commander-in-chief of Continental Forces. But it wasn't because he was born that way. Leadership is a process by which a person, I'm going the wrong way, excuse me, y'all. No, it's in there twice. Let's talk about the types of leadership, because as I mentioned before, if somebody is born that way, we're talking about the trait theory of leadership. Now, it does help. A lot of surveys that have done, it helps to have height. It does help. But also, there was a little French general that I think stood about 5'2", that was probably one of the greatest generals of all time, which disproves the height theory. Is it intelligence? It does help if you've got above average intelligence if you're a leader. Extroversion is another one of those that they put into the trait theory of leadership. Fluency, the ability to speak and articulate the language and express yourself, and then other traits. But there's another one over here which is called interaction. It is the process theory of leadership. It is a process where there is interaction that is constant between the followers and the leader. It can be observed. This one just resides in people. It's just magic. Now, the 4 factors of leadership, according to the U.S. Army and their 1983 manual, is there's leaders, there are followers, there's communication, and there's situation. And we're going to talk about each one of these. The leader. In the Army, they do a lot in developing leadership. It's the very core. It's the reason the Army is organized the way it is. What's the span of influence? 7. So that's why you've got in every squad, you've got a squad leader and you've got an assistant squad leader. There are 12 people in that squad. That's control 6. That's how they organize that way. Followers. You got to have followers if you've got a leader. Well, a leader doesn't exist very well without followers. In the Army, of course, that's automatic. You got your troops. Either you're a good leader or you're a bad leader. Communication is that magic that occurs between the leader and the followers. In fact, I was watching AMC this weekend, and if you remember the movie, We Were Soldiers, the guy that played it was the guy that played Braveheart. What was his name? Who? Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson plays the part. But it's amazing the communication that goes on between him and his men in that firefight. Absolutely amazing. Situation. Every situation is different. There will be some employees that may be brand new. They're going to take a lot of closer supervision. You have others that may not be that easily motivated. Maybe they don't have motivation. That leader's going to have to look at the situation and see what's required there. He's going to have to supply some of the motivation, the inspiration. The other is leader versus boss. If you're a boss, your leadership has been assigned by your superior. He's taken you and said, you're to be the supervisor. You're to be the manager. But does that mean they're going to be an inspiring boss, an inspirational boss? Or you've got an emergent leader. Leadership that makes his followers want to achieve high goals. And that's from Rowe, published in 2007. All that put together provides that framework for total leadership. It's important to concentrate, and in the Army they teach you concentrate upon Whoa, what did I do there? Help. What did I do? Huh? Well, anyway, I'll keep on going. Okay. It's important to concentrate upon the be, know, and do. What is be? What we are. It's important for a leader to know who he or she is. Know what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do. Know your likes, know your dislikes. Know your strengths, know your weaknesses. Because I can tell you this, all of us have got all of those. And where a leader has weaknesses, they must surround themselves with people that complement to give that strength. That's why you see, like when Nardelli came to Home Depot, when they hired him, he brought a whole team with him. He'd worked with them. He knew them. He'd worked with them at GE. He brought his team because that team was to complement Bob Nardelli to make him a more successful leader. Know what you know and know what you don't know. It's also important to apply this to the followers. Form of B is are. Who are your folks? Know them well. In the Army, one's life depends upon knowing those troops, knowing their strengths, knowing their weaknesses. And it's also true in business. If you're going to really thrive and succeed, you must know your people. Now, going back to that instrument, do you see why that gives you a picture of what a person is? Because it covers everything from self-disclosing to unrevealing, unsure, self-confident, independent, team-oriented. If you got a job that's requiring a team and they're not team-oriented, you don't put them on the team. They're not going to make a good team player. The easygoing or restless. Solitary, what is their abilities? Is it lower aptitude? I always like to hire people smarter than me because I know then when problems get solved, they do a lot better job than I. So the scholastic ability and aptitude is also measured by this. Are they emotional or even keel? All of this goes into you knowing your people. I keep that in every person's file because sometimes things go and I said, why did they do that? You go back here and you're going to find the answer. It's going to be right there in your file, right on that assessment. Oh, I did it again. No, I think that's good. We're going to go ahead and let me just close out. Again, I thank y'all so much. I'm just overwhelmed that many of you would have come in here to listen to little old me because I'm just really appreciate your attention. But leadership is again something that is a science. Leaders are made. They are not born. And I hope all of you look at leadership, and there's so much out there that's written on leadership. And Warren Bennett is my really my idol. I mean, I read everything Warren Bennett has put out. Probably the most prolific writer on leadership of anybody. Has been in demand for speaking for 30 years. Has great quotes. One of his quotes that I'm just going to share with you is he said, I used to think leading a company was like being a conductor and conducting an orchestra. But he says, I've come to learn it's more like jazz. There's a lot of improvisation. Thank you all for letting me come and be with you.
So you started off in Macon. What made you decide that you wanted to go into in the international space?
It just happened. I mean, it wasn't by design. It wasn't something back when I was 20 years old, I had no idea I'd even want to be mayor. And that kind of built, so kind of things happen and then it just built. And that's what I meant. It's more like jazz, improvisation. You take what comes at you and you make it work. Try to make it pretty, make it sound good. And I've kind of done that. I mean, if whatever I've done, though, I've tried to do with all my heart, all my might. And I think that's how we ought to approach everything. I tell that to my son all the time. I said, remember, you know, first impression is lasting impression. Do the best you can everywhere you are in any position you're in. Okay?
Okay, sorry. I was just curious about how logistically the foundation gets all the books to the kids. Like, how does that work? Is it
okay? That's a good question.
Time delayed, or?
It's a good question. We're a little bit different than other partners of the Dolly Parton Imagination Library. We, of course, raise the money. 501c3. We do it through foundations. We do it through individuals. We do it through companies contributing. We then buy the books. The books cost $3 a piece. They are drop shipped to the Tommy Nobis Center here in the metro area. We write the parents piece, the newsletter. The newsletter serves as the address label because it has the label on that. We then get those. They're printed. We buy. Who's doing our printing now? Yeah. But they're printed up here in Atlanta. They then are taken over to the Tommy Nobis Center. They put them together, shrink wrap it, and then they're mailed by mail. The biggest expense we have is the shipping and postage and handling, which is about to us about $500,000 a year. We're always trying to find ways to cut that down. But logistically, that's kind of how we do it. Now, another piece of the logistics is registering kids. And the way we're organized is we have community action teams, and Robin invented all of this. We have community action teams we call CATs in the communities in which we operate. And those CATs raise money locally. We act as their fiscal agent. That way they don't have to go through 80 audits and pay for 80 CPAs to get an audit, because you can't receive money from any 501c3 or any foundation unless you've got that unless you got an audit. And if you don't, just like the United Way in Bibb County has cut off the CAT down there because they didn't have an audit. And so United Way's not going to keep putting money into an effort, no matter how good it is, if it doesn't have an audit. So the CATs are responsible for raising money, and they're also responsible for publicity and responsible for registration. And registration is done a lot of different ways. Here in Atlanta, we're looking at trying to use 3 of the hospitals, Piedmont, what used to be Georgia Baptist, and Grady. There are 16,000 births every year, and in the plan that we've kind of got put together, it's the first year is to have 16,000 registered and then increase it exponentially after that. But there's 750,000 children under age 5 in Georgia. I also have been trying to get the governor's office to look at maybe them putting up a third or putting up a half, and then we'll go out and try to raise the money to match it. And then maybe we could come closer. We're at about 80,000 kids. We just lost about 40,000 because of the Department of Human Resources funding getting changed. Not that they did it in the department, it happened over in the House and in the General Assembly. They put it into Head Start slots, which love Head Start, but I'd rather have positively impacted 40,000 kids rather than 400 Head Start positions. So, but that's kind of how all the moving parts. I told Robin we got a lot of moving parts. We do.
I know you talked a lot about leadership. What is the one trait you look for in emerging leaders?
I think interaction with the followers is the listening is so important. It's so important that a leader listen to the followers. If you don't listen, you can have problems. It's not that you can always do what followers want you to do, but you listen. I think the lack of listening means I'm not interested in you. I'm not interested in what you think. I'm not interested in what your opinion is. I mean, it just communicates so much. And that part about communication piece where there were 4 factors, a lot of that communication is the communication the leader receives. Because part of that communication, some communication it's not all verbal. A lot of it is nonverbal. And the nonverbal says so much to the followers about who you are. Whether you listen with an interesting look on your face or you roll your eyes, I mean, all of that communicates something of who you are as a leader, and you're not going to get them too excited if they're negative nonverbal communications going on.
Yep. So thinking about the state of the Georgia economy, obviously the Ferst Foundation is looking to address long-term systemic issues having to do with childhood literacy.
Right.
And I guess my question is kind of speaking back towards the Georgia Chamber of Commerce. And I was kind of curious to know some of the short-term initiatives to attract business leaders and international interest into the state, and kind of hearing your experience about that.
Okay. Well, one, Georgia has an excellent reputation outside. We've been a fast-growing state. Our higher education institutions mean so much in the economic development arena. Cannot tell you how much tech means. In fact, I was telling somebody a little while ago, one of my buddies on the red carpet tour we have done to attract industry a red carpet tour. We have just done the 50th year. And we'll invite 50 CEOs from around the state at the time of the Masters, and we show them parts of Georgia. We always show them Atlanta, may take them to Savannah, may take them to Macon, may take them to Columbus, and let them see some of the opportunities that are there. But the one thing that happened on this particular one, this was a double PhD who had invented a end-stage liver disease perfusion machine that would take somebody offline and let their liver heal, and the machine would completely clean out their blood, which is nothing short of amazing. Now, he's looked at Georgia, and he was in Wisconsin. The reason he's interested in Georgia is Georgia Tech and some of the nanotechnology research that was going on here. He was interested in Emory and Georgia because of the life science research going on there and the proximity to the Medical College of Georgia and the school at Emory, medical school at Emory. So that was the reason he looked at Georgia. The place he picked, which was unusual, was Dublin, Georgia. So that just gives you an idea of how people view it. I mean, so Georgia is viewed very positively by most CEOs. As far as addressing education, the Georgia Chamber, I think, when I was on their board back in the 1990s, education at that time was we decided it was the #1 issue for business. And I know Margaret Jones, who is also on the board of the Georgia Chamber, knows of efforts. In fact, Melvin Kruger and several other folks actually formed the Georgia Partnership for Excellence in Education. They reside in the chamber. Now, they're a separate company, separate 501c3, but we knew we needed to do something in education, and the Georgia Partnership for Excellence in Education was what we did. That was our answer. But I think this answer, what we're trying to do in reading, and that's why I love that whoever came up with it, Robin or whatever, imagine the possibilities. I mean, you stop and think about what this could do to the state of Georgia and in economic development is amazing.
Is there an explanation for why Georgia consistently ranks at the bottom on these standardized tests? Because I know it's been a focus for a number of years in terms of improving it, but is it our demographics? Is it the income levels in the state? Is it the quality of the education system? Why can't we get it right? What do we need to do differently to improve those
I think we have a cycle of illiteracy and a cycle of poverty that goes hand in hand. I think it's some of it is socioeconomic, but when you add to that a lack of literacy in parents, I think you've got the answer. A parent who reads to their child, that child is going to comprehend so much more. And that's what those test scores show. I mean, Morgan County tied for 3rd out of all school systems in the state of Georgia. But it also spills over into language arts. It spills over into social studies. It spills over into science. A child who's grown up that can't read, how are they going to understand a biology book? How are they going to understand a chemistry book? Now, chemistry maybe is a little bit close to being like math, but it still is understanding principles and concepts. And until you understand that, you can't learn. So I think the reading does more to do that than anything I know. And I wish our faith-based community would really get involved in that in the state, because I think they could make so much difference. Oh, I'm sorry.
What do you think impacted you to be so passionate about this program as opposed to other programs that are out there that are really similar? I know, like in my county, we would send high schoolers to primary or elementary schools to read to kids.
I think the reason I'm so passionate about it, because I have always believed, and Steve Dollinger, who is at the Georgia Partnership, used to say, a parent ought to be a child's first best teacher. And I really believe that. I think these numbers show here too that as a society, we point at the teacher. We point at the school system. When the truth is, it ought to be us. It ought to be parents. It's the home life. It's how much time they spend studying rather than in front of a television. And to me, the consistency of this program is, and it starts so early. I mean, this thing starts when a child is born. And a child should be read to at 2 weeks. They hear the intonation, there's a lot of cues that an infant will pick up on. And I just saw it even with my own children. I read, my daughter's favorite book was a Beatrice Potter book, Appley Dapley. Appley Dapley, a little brown mouse, goes to the cupboard in somebody's house. In that cupboard is everything nice, cake, cheese, jam, and biscuits, all charming for mice. I've read that so many times, I got it memorized, but that was her favorite book. And she now is an avid reader. She done well all the way through school. Same thing with my son. He finished as a landscape architect. I mean, the reading, I've seen it in my own family. My mother read to me. I mean, she read to all four of us. And I just see the difference. But this one is consistent. They're going to get a book every month. That child, when they go to the kindergarten at the age of 5, is going to have a library of 60 books. How many of y'all got a library of 60 books? Good for y'all. But imagine every child in the state of Georgia having a library of 60 books before they've ever been to school. That's what this program will do. That's why I'm so enthusiastic about it.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Feaster, and I had a quick question about how do you motivate parents to actually read to their students? I mean, it's one thing to be able to provide books to the parents, but how do you get the parents actually reading to their kids?
I think the book arriving, Robbie Macon answers, I mean, I think the book arriving and the child getting their first book or getting a book, they're going to meet the mailman at the mailbox. That book's going to be, that shrink wrap's going to be torn off. They're going to be back at the parent. The kid's going to make it happen. Now, I'm sure that in some instances where you've got illiteracy, we've seen parents, though, haven't we, Robin, that could not read, that have come out and said, I need to learn to read if I'm going to. So it works both ways. So that's why I believe so in it. Now, I'm sure there's some that maybe, we know there's child abuse and infant abuse that goes on, and I'm sure in some small percentages that happens, but, you know, God help us, it doesn't. But all we can do is try to get that book there and think that naturally that's just it's going to take off. Isn't that what you would think, Robin?
Sure. And it really doesn't matter if the parent can actually read the words in the book.
Yeah.
Because they're going to tell a story around pictures. It's the vocabulary enrichment that the child needs. It's the interaction with the parent that tells them, I love you.
All that's so important. Yeah, yeah.
All that.
That bonding becomes so critical. The child will be more confident.
This is sort of a follow-up to that question. Have you seen instances where parents are kind of taking the cue and saying, why stop at just one book a month, and sort of taking steps on their own to go get more books for their kids, seeing the value, seeing the progression?
I don't think we've got any empirical data on that. We certainly haven't. I'm sure, you know, when a child gets interested in books, they're going to gravitate towards books. And to me, it was a 5 and dime. I grew up reading golden books. Y'all probably don't even know what golden books were. I always envied my cousin who had a library of golden books. I mean, I had a number, but not like, but hers came from her grandfather. Every time Dr. Ware came to Macon, Georgia, he brought a golden book. And that's how she got her huge collection of golden books.
We do send the first library card with the first book.
Yeah.
In some of the rural communities where they are able to keep track of the registration, some of those library cards have been increased 20-50% by having encouraged the parents to come to the library after they get the book every month. And there are activities that they're able to talk about in the newsletter that encourage them to come to story times, et cetera, in the library. So there's, on the local level, there's a lot more that this is a catalyst for than in isolation.
Well, that's well put.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Vel Marie Cager, and I serve in a ministry called 7 Bridges to Recovery. It's a street outreach ministry that goes out under the bridges and in the streets of Atlanta. People are living under the bridges. Children are under the bridges. Also, around the Bluff area, Vine City is drug neighborhood. And in Morgan County, and maybe this is one reason why they were so successful with the CRCT scores, Fish for Kids they feed 2,000 meals a day during the summer and to students around Morgan County. When children are hungry, when their parents are hungry, that's the last thing that they're thinking about. It's not an excuse, but when they can't find where the next meal may be, or if the parents are not with them, with relatives, it's just so much that is going on. And going under the bridges and in the actual streets is just unimaginable. I've never seen anything like it. So until we can get into that setting and try to help the parents and the guardians to help our children, I don't know what else we can do. You know, only God knows. But I do know that not making excuses, because you don't need a lot of money to learn how to read, to get an education. You do not need a lot of money. Money is good, don't get me wrong. But it's so much that we need to try to get to the root of actually under the bridges and in those drug-infected areas. And the kids are innocent victims. Sometimes the parents are. They don't have nowhere to go or where to turn. But in Morgan County, I was really impressed with Fish for Kids. And they fed 2,000 a day, not a week, 2,000 lunches, and delivered those lunches. And also now on weekends, they send home lunch packs for Saturday and Sunday lunches. So that's,
There are a lot of good things. In fact, Terry Bloom and I were talking about the numbers and what do they indicate. And we wanted a longitudinal study, but that hadn't happened. And there are a lot of good things that go on in Morgan County. Not only do they had a very good superintendent, they got a new good superintendent, a great board of education itself, great teachers, great principals. There are a lot of good things that complement that, but I think it comes back to what Robin says. A lot of times we find the cat becomes a catalyst for a lot of good things that happen that doesn't even, it's not ours, but it just happens.
We have time for 2 more questions, so sir, you're up.
I saw on the map that where you showed the counties that y'all were involved in, and it's kind of scattered all over the state of Georgia. What's the biggest hurdles when you're trying to get this program implemented in the new counties?
Well, one is you got to have a good cat. I think we've seen the stronger cats have people that are action-oriented, that are very engaged, a lot of energy. They want to make it happen. They're passionate about it. Secondly is their ability to fundraise locally. We'll help them do what they can do. But I'd say that's it. There are plenty of kids out there. Some counties are different. One of the difficulties in Morgan County is they don't have a birthing hospital. So how do you find the kids? They do it mainly through daycare. But up here in Atlanta, where you've got birthing hospitals, it's a natural to do it through the auxiliary of the hospitals or something. As soon as that child is born, tell them sign your child up for a free book a month for the next 5 years. The other thing I took out, Stan DeJarnett, who is the superintendent there, past superintendent, they did do some surveys of teachers, and his number was that at one time they were getting only 60% arriving at kindergarten ready to learn. After the program was in effect, that first class that came through, they saw that go up to, I think it was over 90%, wasn't it, Robin? Over 90% came to kindergarten ready to learn. What are we talking about ready to learn? Understanding concepts. You don't understand how over, under, colors, numbers. I mean, the concepts of down, up. A lot of kids don't have that. They don't understand it. It's never been, but they get this through reading. And in fact, going through the books, you see how the writers and the way they've selected it, it's teaching some concepts that they're going to be able to apply knowledge when they get to kindergarten. One of the most incredible periods 200 years ago when that band of rebels, they came from all sectors. There were clergymen, there were business people, there were transportation folks, and they got in that room at that Continental Congress and they created this country. The thing that's amazing about every one of them is they cared. And thank y'all for letting me come, and I hope you care too.